Perfect. I think we're live, guys. Hello, everyone that's joined us for this morning's webinar. We'll sort of chat through introductions and housekeeping for a couple of minutes and give some more people some time to log in. So first and foremost, welcome to only our second session on the APAC Fireside Chat. So these series of webinars is an opportunity for me to pretty much have a conversation and in a fireside chat format, experts on a particular field. We've got two experts today around incident response, Simon and Damien, and we'll let the guys introduce themselves in a moment. And I'm very much looking forward to this one today. Selfishly, I always learn a lot from these conversations, and Damien and Simon are going to drop some knowledge bombs for us for sure. Just quick housekeeping rules for everyone. If you do want to, good morning, Gibby. Yeah, if we can get some good mornings and hellos in the chat, that would be get a bit of engagement going. That would be good. But if you do have specific questions that you want to ask Damien or Simon as we go through, please use the Q&A function. And if we don't get to those questions as we go through the webinar today, we'll save 10 to 15 minutes at the end to answer those. All right. So good morning, everyone. And I would like to introduce our experts for today, Damien and Simon. I'll let the guys introduce themselves. So Damien, perhaps we'll start with you.
Look, my name's Damien. I founder and managing director of Solvent Network Support based in Canberra, and we're an MSP specialising in small to medium business.
Great. I'm Simon. I'm the cyber incident manager for CFC or Solace Security. Spend my day responding to cyber incidents for our clients of varying size and nature.
Awesome. Thanks, Damien. Thanks, Simon. So guys, a topic, of course, incident response today. I would love just a bit of an overview or some insight into how do we define incident response? Like, what is incident response? I think there's certain definitions and it differs between who you are. So Simon, perhaps start with you, mate. How would you define incident response?
Yeah, sure. So from our side, it is the process that follows a detection of some sort in a client environment, whether you've had a detection through your EDR tooling or from your SIEM or from an IDS platform, but something has set off alert. It's then for a process of there are some concerns there, and if that's able to be verified as some type of unauthorized access into your environment and so on, incident response is kind of the process that follows as a byproduct of that alert. And so, starting with identification, I guess if we speak about the traditional incident response process, the identification of that incident, and then the containment of the environment, eradication of the threat, moving through to recovery, and then eventually like lessons learned and so on. And again, like I said, that's kind of the traditional approach. There's kind of now a dynamic approach that's kind of followed, because the traditional approach seemed to be it was maybe too static, it wasn't very flexible in its delivery. And what I mean by that is, as you run through those stages, you find yourself, at a later stage in of the investigation, having to come back and cycle back to some of the earlier stages and so on. So therefore, there's now a dynamic approach to the response, I guess. So I mean, I can speak. We could probably speak all day about this, but again, as I said, kind of just summarising that incident response, it includes preparation stages for businesses as well, which certainly should be addressed before you have an incident. But again, identification of the incident, containment, locking down environments, deploying tools and so on, hopefully solid root cause analysis and eradication of the threat, leading through to recovery of the environment, and then all the way through to lessons learned. So that's my certainly my definition of the incident response process.
No, thanks, Simon. I'd love to touch on as well how that incident response process has evolved over time, and I'm sure we'll get to some of that with some real live examples as well. Damien, from your perspective, mate, would love to kind of understand how you frame it and describe it to your customers, because I'm assuming a lot of your customers aren't necessarily technical.
No, 100%, and that's what they pay us for. It's essentially how we identify and how we react to an incident or a data breach or some type of security threat that poses a risk to their business and their data. And we always start with the identifying, containing the threat, so we then can do a bit of an analysis on what's going on. So it's really important to have a clear line in the sand with your customers, so they understand what level of security you're providing to them and how we react. And really important to that is an incident response plan. And we have a default plan that we use, a template that we use with our clients, and we work with them to clearly define whose role, who's responsible for what, and if something does happen, we can enact that plan and start that process accordingly. So I think it's really important from that onset, from that initial conversation with a new client or a customer, to determine what will happen if an incident does occur, and what we define an incident as. A security breach, like Simon said earlier, is it just something flagged in the EDR, or is it actually a compromised account, and have a strategy around that. I mean, there's a lot of variables that have to be covered there, but it's about having something in place, a foundational document that clearly defines what each role is to do and how we move forward accordingly.
I'd love to touch on an incident response plan and dig into that a little bit. Before we do, you mentioned, Damien, kind of roles and responsibilities. Who, and either of you can answer this first, but who generally is involved in, what are the different stakeholders and organizations typically involved in an incident response?
Sure, I can jump in first if you like. So obviously we've got the victim, the business. They may have the internal IT. We may have an external MSP. We've got many different external vendors that are coming along to support the client as well. Generally, I'm talking legal representatives, communication specialists. You're definitely going to need that. Again, whenever we're talking about incident response, we always lean towards ransomware, because we're always dealing with so much of this, and it's very much, for me, worst case scenario, globally or for businesses. So again, a lot of times it's legal, communications management. You may even need a threat actor negotiator as well, potentially data recovery specialists. So there's a number of stakeholders there that are coming along, to work collaboratively and support that client.
And with that kind of high stress, because it is a high stress environment, those situations, do you see friction between all of those stakeholders, the customer, the partner, insurance? Like, is there friction or just friction within that high stress environment that you see?
So I can jump in first. Look, we do see that from time to time. It's certainly a high stress environment, that is for sure. And my kind of approach is to let's get all the stakeholders, get all the key stakeholders into a call. Let's put a face to the name. Let's define those roles and responsibilities. It's important for me, from my side as well, for one key person to be driving. That's generally myself from our side as well, so that you can kind of keep cadence with all of the roles and responsibilities and tasks that need to be undertaken and so on, if you will. But we do. You can see friction. I think from our side, I don't often see it too much internally, which is good. There may be a few times here and there you might get some frustrations if that business hasn't planned adequately, and then so there's frustrations around, well, who's doing what and whose responsibility is it from a communications perspective to say who's going to be speaking to the media, who's going to be, I've seen that from time to time. When it comes to us working with other vendors, occasionally with managed service providers, there can be a bit of a I guess you could call it friction. I think sometimes it is. I don't know whether it's because they feel that we're coming in and maybe the investigation is a bit of an investigation on them and the failings in the environment, or will the report that we provide at the end highlight failings, or are we are they concerns with us coming in and maybe trying to take over management of the environment moving forward. Again, this is all kind of assumption because we don't generally have those discussions. But my approach is really, if I do feel that we're kind of getting that pushback or that there is that kind of feeling in the room, I'll make it very clear that we are here just to assist the client. The investigation is just to help the client moving forward, so that we can get them out of this spot and move them forward with confidence, and that it's very much a collaborative effort, and that we're very much here to work harmoniously with everyone. And from that kind of approach, I find that things settle down quite quickly, and then we're all in a much better spot to move forward. So that's kind of really my experience. And I'd say it's more of a on the rare side, if you will. This isn't something that we get all the time, So yeah, that's my experience.
And I think putting an MSP hat on, we've been involved where we've had to bring in insurance and stuff, and it's speaking to the insurance company and knowing where you stand as well, and having a clearly defined pathway forward. Sometimes the insurance company or the broker that you're dealing with, you can demonstrate, look, we've identified where the breach has come from, we've contained that breach, this is what we want to plan to move forward with our remediation steps, and they'll go and assess it and go, yeah, green tick, please move forward, we're happy for you to do that. And other times they go, well, no, we want to do our investigation. So I think it's really important to be, to clearly define those roles and speak to the broker or the insurance company if there is an incident that's being, claimed, for an example, and then working out that path forward. And it has to happen through a de-escalated, non-friction conversation with the business owners, the right stakeholders in place, the MSP or the internal security or internal IT for the client. And yeah, it has to be, and like I said earlier, it has to be clearly defined, and that's something that is really important in that IR plan. That we can define those paths and those responsibilities before a breach happens, because when something does go wrong, the stressful situation, people make ad hoc decisions that they wouldn't normally make under the stress, and so if we've got a clearly defined roles, and okay, if something goes wrong and we need to bring in a communication specialist, to protect our brand and our reputation, who are we going to use? Have we, it needs to be defined. And I think once you have those plans in place, it means that in the event of something does go wrong, you've got the right path forward, and it takes the stress off everyone. It's like you said, it is a stressful situation when any type of data breach occurs, but if you've got that plan outlined, it de-escalates the situation.
I agree with that, absolutely. I was just going to touch on as well, there's so much benefit from, a lot of in the preparation stage of the incident response, if you will, what businesses do, the tabletops, if you can run tabletop scenarios once a year, have all those key partners, vendors in the room. So if you've got an insurer and they've got a response team like ours, and Damien, if you will, and the teams come along and very quickly, we can work through those sessions, and everyone knows their key roles and responsibilities moving forward. It's also ability to communicate with those third parties as well, and build a rapport. And heap of value in that preparation stage.
It sounds like it keeps coming back to preparation and communication. So I want to dig into that preparation piece. Just want to highlight as well, we do tabletop exercises sometimes with our partners, and the ones that do not have incident response plan or that preparation stage, the chaos that ensues even in a simulated tabletop exercise is very apparent. So I couldn't agree more that preparation piece is important. So before we move on and kind of touch on incident preparation, IR preparation, Richardson has a question around a post-incident report. So could you guys talk to kind of a post-incident report, and in particular, how much information should you be providing to the end customer?
That's a good question.
Great question.
It is, and I'm always very careful with how I answer these. I say, because generally, with our experience, when we're performing IR, we have we've got our team, the technical team that are responding. We've got the legal team that are assisting them from a legal and regulatory perspective, data risk, etc. And then they've got a communications manager as well that are coming along. We very much lean on their experience in this space to be able to guide the client to make the right decisions around what to say, how much to say, what not to say, if you will. So it's yeah, in regards to a post-incident report. I mean, certainly, I mean, if we're talking about kind of lessons learned and what's better, I'd be capturing absolutely everything as you go along. It's kind of important for you know, for you to be documenting the process as you go, if you can, so that you can take that information and when you have when you're in a better position from a recovery standpoint, you can sit down, the business can sit down and have a look at that and see, you know, what have you learned, you know, from this? You know, was a particular stage of the incident response held up for too long because, hey, we didn't have a communication strategy and we went back and forth for quite some time. So there's those considerations. But when it comes to, I guess, what you're going to provide to a client that maybe was affected by the breach, yeah, it's something that I would, if I'm honest, I would generally lean on the legal team and the communications manager. I mean, essentially, they're going to know that you've had, if their data has been affected, they are going to know, because there's going to be you know, notifications to those affected stakeholders. But in regards to what level of detail that you tell them in regards to you know, how, root cause of the you know, lateral movement, what you know, where has the data been leaked to, and this, it was if I'm honest, I would very much lean on a legal and communication specialist to kind of be able to answer that for us.
I would always say never use the word sophisticated. Oh, it was a sophisticated attack, because you'll find 9 times out of 10 it was the problem between the keyboard and the chair, which is the user, and they've done something like approved an MFA request, you know, at night through MFA fatigue. So it needs to be really concise. I think what you disclose to the customer, or the report you provide, needs to be, you know, obviously factually correct, but how they disclose it to the public needs to go through a communication specialist and run through legal and so on and so forth, because you probably don't want to, you know, say exactly or 100% what happened. You want to provide enough information to reassure the public that, you know, we're on top of it and we've identified a problem, and that's where I think legal standpoint comes into place, and speaking to the right legal professionals on that. But yeah, our rule of thumb is never use the word sophisticated, because sophisticated attack that caused our systems to be breached, and it was someone approved an MFA request at 3 o'clock in the morning because their phone was beeping at them, and, you know, MFA fatigue has kicked in and they're just like, I just need to go to sleep, and then obviously let the Russian hacker into the network. So that would be where I would attack it from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can again, like I said, very careful and answer these things. I think I can kind of confidently say, like, there will certainly be something within that report which speaks to what improvements have been made to ensure the you know, the security of that data moving forward. So I know that there will, you know, that report will definitely have some information around improvements to the environment and what safeguards have been put in place, and to, you know, instill some confidence moving forward those clients. So that'll definitely be part of the report. But again, yeah, I'm going to lean on legal for these responsibilities.
Yeah. It also probably depends on the level of the breach. You know, if it's a single email account that's been compromised and, you know, a spam email has been sent out to the contacts list, it's very different to an SQL database being compromised with PII data in there that, you know, identifies thousands of customers and personal information being leaked onto the dark web. So, I mean, you know, it really depends on the type of breach it is, and like Simon said, I think in these instances, you need to consult with your communication specialist and the legal team to find the message that you want to convey to the public. You know, I would happily disclose everything that's happened to the customer, but I would once again warn them accordingly that you need to seek proper advice from the right standpoint on how you convey that message to the public, and you know, and how we would populate a data breach notification accordingly.
Always check with legal.
Yeah.
Always
Yeah.
check with legal. And look, that kind of ties in, I suppose, to that preparation piece and having those partners ready for when there is a breach. So can either of you guys talk to what a good incident response plan looks like?
Sure, I'll start. And you know, kind of from our side, there'll be a number of steps within an incident response plan which are generic in nature. I guess would be, you know, good fit for most businesses. And then I guess there's certain parts of the incident response plan which are unique to that business, in my opinion. And it can be, why are they important? Well, it's going to give you a methodical approach to respond to that incident. It's going to give you a single point of reference for the business to to look at and to work through those stages of without the plan, it can become quite overwhelming quite quickly. It kind of gives you some stability during a time which is honestly, it's crazy. It's going to be crazy, and it's going to be chaotic internally. So they're also important because you might need them from an auditing and compliance perspective as well. So they're certainly key to have from that perspective as well. I mean, look, it's going to have all your key contacts in that incident response plan. It's going to be able to, it's going to have a matrix that will have the ability to be able to classify the type of incident that you're having as well. How much infrastructure is down, how many employees or clients or customers are affected, so then that the business can classify the incident as a P1, P2, P3, however you classify your incidents. And then from the classification of the incident, there will be steps to, this is how we recover, given it's a P1, P2, P3, and that will lead into a communication strategy, how we commit, so again, you've got an incident response plan, but you can also have there might be a suite of policy documents, if you like, the communication strategy, maybe your ransomware playbook. There could be a number of documents that you kind of refer to, your disaster recovery plan, much one of the same document in some regards. But it will be, also it'll include, who do we need to notify? As in, do we need to notify an insurer? If we need to notify the insurer, at what point do we notify the insurer? What's that trigger point? How do we notify? Again, going back to those contact details, emergency contact details for your crisis management team in the event that, you obviously have a crisis management team. What if somebody's away or somebody's sick? How do we pivot to manage that? And then it can have everything down to critical assets, infrastructure, where data is stored, priority for recovery. When you get to that point, I mean, honestly, we could sit here and probably go on about it all day. I might kind of hand over to Damien as well for how they capture these things from their side. But it could be how to isolate specific systems, a restore process, from your backups in the event that you need to implement that process. And Damien.
Yeah. Well, every business is different. An incident response plan for a retail outlet that's doing thousands of transactions on a website is very different to, say, a landscaper that does one transaction a week. So really defining that response, like you said, those key people that are involved and who's responsible for what. I think that's the basis of any good incident response plan. Having the right tools in place, like you're saying with the disaster recovery, immutable backup copies, things like that. Having the right solutions and the right security stack from an MSP's perspective is really important, that we build those into the IR plan and go, well, in this event we've got backups in these places, with an immutable copy, we can restore the data accordingly. Like I said, there's a lot of variables there, but I think that the key takeaway needs to be having that clearly defined, who's responsible for what, where, what your contact details are, like you said, who the legal team is, who the communications team is, and a strategy moving forward. If you just base it off the OAC, contain, assess, identify, and review. Obviously, as an MSP or an IT provider, we want to contain that breach straight away. So that would be part of the plan. Enacting how we contain that. What do we look for? Reviewing those logs. Then, the next stage would probably be speaking with the client. Okay, who's your insurance company? That should already be defined clearly in the incident response plan, and speaking to them and keeping them in the loop as well, and really, depending on the next outcomes or what type of breach it is, would sort of depend on how we would move forward. But I think clearly defined roles, clearly defined information on who the contacts are, who the emergency contacts are. Like you said, who do you pivot to if these people are away? That needs to be set up prior to any breach, because if you're trying to do that and pick up the pieces and build that plan all at one time, that's when friction and stress and things go on. And chances are, if you're an MSP, you'll lose that client if you haven't got those policies and procedures in place prior to a breach. 9 times out of 10 you'll lose that customer.
Mm. And Damien, I would suggest you're probably quite mature and unique in that most of your customers have an incident response plan as part of the engagement that you have with them. When do you approach the incident response plan with your customers?
Look, that would be part of our initial conversation with the onboarding of a client. We will charge a little bit more than most MSPs, I would suggest, for onboarding, and that would be because we want to document and build these strategies and policies out, and that entails multiple meetings with customers to understand their threshold for risk and their tolerances, and working out, well, what are their biggest risks? Like I said earlier, a customer that's doing transactions on a website, thousands of transactions, has a different risk appetite or a different risk matrix to, a landscaper that's doing a handful of transactions a week. So identifying that, I mean, not taking away from the fact they're both open for exploit. If someone is not doing MFA properly, or that hasn't been implemented right, and their email account gets compromised, it could be a large organization or a sole trader. There still needs to be a layer or a level of strategy and policies and a procedure in place to how to address that accordingly. And that conversation is a really important one to have with your customers, even if you're looking at moving forward to upsell or to provide, start doing that MSSP, that security as a service, and then bringing that in and charging accordingly. You have to be able to bill for your time, obviously, as an MSP, and so it's really important that you set draw a line in the sand, and you set those expectations from both perspectives. That the expectation for the client is that we're going to provide X service, and our expectation for them is that they're going to provide X amount of information, so we can provide that service and be honest and upfront on what we do and how we do it, and come to a marry in the middle and come to a solution accordingly. Pretty much that's how we would start it from that initial conversation for a new client. Existing client will then go in. You've got to have that conversation. The world's changed. All you have to do is look at Optus breach, Medibank private, Latitude. Start rattling off some of those names, and they go, yeah, okay, let's work out a strategy here. And so that's really important that you have that conversation and it be front of mind.
And you mentioned kind of getting the customer prepared. Obviously, the incident response plan does that. You mentioned tabletop exercises before, Simon. Like, how does one prepare their customer for a breach or for an incident response?
Yeah, I think really the table for me, running through them tabletop crisis simulations are gold. I mean, honestly, I've performed a number of those here. I work with the internal team to build out a scenario for a client, and then I will facilitate that session. And it's very much what I do day in, day out, just with the comfort of not having it's not actually happening, right? So for me, it's a great way for the clients to identify gaps in their processes. Test those documents as well. You've got like your IR document and your comms strategy and your incident, your ransomware playbook, if you will. And yeah, so it gives you the ability to test documents, and from a gap analysis perspective, it's brilliant. It will really, and it also helps the business understand their roles and responsibilities as they sit around that table. That each inject that you throw in really prompts for so much conversation around. Okay, well, you obviously mix it up a little bit as well, so that because cyber incidents have never come at a good time, and they always come when someone's away, or it's a crucial time in the calendar for that business. So you mix it up like that as well. So you really push them down a path of having to make key decisions at difficult times in their calendar and so on. And so yeah, they really come away with a real understanding of what these things look like. Some of the decisions they will have to make very, very quickly. And I think, again, to summarize it, really that gap analysis is perfect. They've got something actionable that they can go away and work on and improve their response. And I think certainly those businesses that perform these crisis sims will be in a much better position to respond to a cyber incident.
It's also security awareness training. I mean, using that SAT training to to help organizations, like you were saying, that calendar, targeting an organization with ATO emails at the end of the financial year is always a great one. You'd be surprised how many CEOs click on, the free Big Mac voucher as well. Educating the team, that disaster recovery plan. I'm sure most MSPs have filled out a insurance document for their clients. When was the last time you did a test restore? You should be doing that once a month, ideally.
Yeah.
And testing the systems. It's all well and good to have all these solutions in place, but if you never test them and then, hits the fan, and they don't work, well, you're in trouble as an MSP. If you're charging them for a service that you can't then deliver on, you need to make sure that those test restores work, that you have a scenario in place that, like I said, with the security awareness training, we're educating the team that you have those scenarios built out with tabletop exercises, so they sort of know what to look for and what it's going to feel like if something does go wrong. I think that's really important as well.
And
Yeah, I was going to just say there, the testing of those backups, like Damon said there as well, it really is critical. The amount of incidents that we jump on, and initially the IT will say, it's okay, we've got backups, we've got them in place, and they have been air gapped, but when they go to restore them, they're corrupt and they haven't been tested for so long, and or one backup set hasn't been running for X amount of time, and they realise that they've maybe got 6, 7, 8 months of data loss. Because they haven't got that, testing schedule happening. So yeah, absolutely agree there.
Air gapped on a physical backup, immutable copy for cloud backup, super important. The last thing you want is a hacker to get access to the backups and encrypt your backups as well. So it's really important that as an MSP, once again, that you've built out the right systems and the right security stack, that you can be resilient and nimble to respond to these types of incidents.
And I guess just to add there as well, there are some businesses where it wouldn't be their primary, it wouldn't be a strategy, but I think they think, they'll say, well, it doesn't matter because haven't we got the option of kind of maybe threat actor negotiation and purchasing a decryption key and so on. There's a number of different threat actor groups that are on sanctions lists, which means if you've been attacked by a sanction entity, nobody can facilitate payment to them anyway. So, the backups in that situation are going to be your saving grace. It's going to be your only way forward. So, I mean, it speaks for itself that your backups are important anyway. But again, these are additional considerations. You might find yourself that even decryption isn't an option. So
you're only as good as your last backup. That's what I always tell my clients. More the better.
Yeah.
And part of this also sounds like, and Damien, you could probably speak to this with your customers, that kind of trying to drive a culture of cybersecurity within your customers is important. I can imagine that some small to medium businesses are a little bit resistant to that because they've got their own stuff going on. How do you drive that within your customers?
Once again, it's a conversation. It's that human firewall to steal someone's marketing. It's about lifting that security posture within the business. It's quite, we often will do a demonstration and send out a heap of phishing emails. Like I said earlier, it's amazing how many times that CEO clicks on the free Big Mac voucher and they've tried it 6 times. And it's building that, it's lifting that culture within the business and educating them accordingly. And once you start to get through to them in that respect, once, like I said, Optus breach, Medibank private, Latitude, once you start to articulate that this is the risk to your business, this is the risk that you face, we need to build, layers of security between the data center and, your endpoints or your users to harden that environment. If you can articulate that right, they're normally pretty good. Small business especially, always concerned with cash flow, economic situations at the moment, cost of living crisis. So there has to obviously be a balancing act, and there's always a trade-off between usability, security, and price. And for each business, it's about finding that right level of balance. I suppose that's the hardest thing, and it sort of takes a bit of time, I would suggest, to really master that that conversation. But once you do, you'll have a foot in the door every time.
So kind of moving into like some of the capabilities required for good incident response. Would love to. One would assume that depending on the degree of, I guess, complexity of the incident, that there would be a level of security. But would love to hear your thoughts on that. So, one would assume that depending on the degree of, I guess, complexity of the incident, that there would be a level of security. But would love to hear your thoughts on that. breach, that a partner, an MSP may need to or be required to bring in an incident response firm, through insurance or otherwise. Simon, could you perhaps talk to some of the unique or specific capabilities that an IR, organization like your CFC Response or Solace would have, and what sort of the tools and things that they would use?
Yeah, sure. I guess the difference, I guess, there are MSPs and SSPs. Obviously, there's very good MSPs that have got the internal security skill set and the capabilities to do this. And then there are others that are really more just focused on the technology side of things and so on. I think the benefits to bringing in a security team is this is what we're doing all day, every day. It's all we do. So we've got a lot of experience with obviously responding to the incidents. We're all certified in whatever area it is, whether incident responders or the forensic analysts and so on. It can be it can be a specific skill set. We've also got extensive tooling that's been customized over years of running incidents and finally tweaked. So there's certainly those benefits as well. So, again, I think it's more just really the experience in this space. So, and I guess if we speak to, our business here, we've got a mountain of threat intels that we're pulling information from, across the globe. We take that information and we gear our scanning around what's currently being leveraged by threat actors across the globe. We're obviously heavily involved from that threat intel piece to understand, the tactics and techniques and the behavioral characteristics of the different threat actors and so on. So I guess it's just leaning on that experience so that then if we're in an incident and we're responding, from a technical standpoint or whatever, we can also we can set expectations and give the client advice as well around, this is the particular behavior of this threat actor, and if there are considerations, we can give them all the information they need so that they can make informed business decisions, internally, whether it's around negotiation or whether it's what to expect if it's harassment techniques that are being thrown at the business, I guess. So I guess, again, really to summarize that, it's just, leaning on that information that we have here, the skill set that we have across the team, and the extensive tooling that we have, which is obviously all geared around security. I mean, sorry, Damon.
I was going to say,
all I was going to add was just, and again, if I speak about the tooling, once we get through the data, the incident response, we've also got data miners here as well. If there's a data, if the data that has been accessed or has been exfiltrated from the environment, it needs to be assessed, and the legal team advise that data mining process needs to be adhered to. We have that internally here as well. So it's kind of a one-stop shop to get you from the point of identification all the way out the other side. We've got our tool here, Breach Hound, that we use to perform that data mining and work with the legal team. So again, just kind of leaning on that tooling within the environment. Sorry, David.
No, I was going to say, from an MSP perspective, obviously, we can't necessarily have teams of security experts working for us. We're, pretty generalized. We have to do a bit of everything. But that's when, having the right partners like Huntress, for an example, in this case, you can leverage their team. I mean, that's what you're paying for. You've got their SOC, they've got their ability to give you detailed remediation steps, or to be able to block an account accordingly and escalate it internally. And then if we need to, if there has been a serious breach, you bring in, the insurance company. They'll bring in their expert team and work hand in hand with that team and with your partners and your vendors to identify and assess and remediate the situation at hand. So I think that's really important, that you don't want to be spread too thin. And I always say, look, we stick to our lane, we do what we do best, and we have partners like Huntress, which are the experts in their field, and we utilize their expertise for that reason. We don't want to say, oh, we're a security expert. I mean, we follow best practices. We read the Microsoft white papers, and we set up Microsoft Office 365 in a certain way, but you utilize the skill set you have, and then you bring in the experts accordingly. And so I think that's really important, that you don't as an MSP, don't try and stretch yourself too thin. use those vendors, use those partners, those trusted vendors, and utilize their skill sets to broaden your security stack and provide that overall better solution for the end user or for the client than it would be if you were trying to do everything yourself.
And I want to, mindful of time as well. We've got 20 minutes left. I want to leave some time at the end for questions. I also want to leave some time for some stories, because I think the audience would like to listen to some stories. But I suppose from to kind of finish off this part is, what I mean, Damien, if we start with you from an MSP perspective, what are some of the considerations or advice or recommendations that you would pose to partners out there with around incident response and planning for that?
It would be, like I said, picking the right partners and the right vendors to work with. We partner with an insurance company in Canberra that specialises in cyber. So we're on the same page. So we're on can ring them up anytime and go, look, this is what's going on. What do you recommend move forward? I think that's really important for an MSP, that you have that relationship, especially so your client come to you and go, oh, we're looking for cyber insurance. Is someone you recommend? And then you can work with that team, the insurance companies, the broker, your partners and vendors, to build that security stack out and have that right level of security in place and that right level of obviously response. Having the right policies and procedures. You knowing who the key people are in the business, and building that strategy. And once you start to piece it together and get it right, like we were saying earlier, it reduces that friction. It provides a better solution for the customer. They feel a lot more confident that they're in a better place. And for me, I feel a lot more confident. I sleep better at night when I know I've got the right backing behind me. Because at the end of the day, the last thing we want is a serious data breach to happen for one of our customers, and then we find out we've done something wrong and we don't have the right level of security or backups or disaster recovery in place, and then we're exposed as the MSP as well. So we want to make sure that we've dotted all our I's, crossed all our T's, and have those right partner and relationships with the different vendors accordingly, to build out that security stack and have the right solution for our clients.
To reduce the chaos if something does occur, Damien.
Look, it's not a matter of if, it's more likely a when.
Yeah.
Like, there is a data breach is going to occur somewhere along the line with one of your customers. You're either the best MSP in the world and everything's perfect, or you're lying to yourself. It's going to happen, and it's a matter of if, not when. And so it's how you respond to that. And like I said earlier, it could be something as simple as an email account gets compromised because the phish-resistant MFA isn't in place, and someone's just reached over at 3 o'clock in the morning through MFA fatigue and approved a hacker getting onto the network. Or it could be something more serious, obviously like a ransomware attack that they've got onto the network and started encrypting a server. So having those right levels of response plans in place on how we deal with these different scenarios, your backup solutions, your EDR, your MDR, what you're doing in that space, your conditional access policies in Office 365, your compliance policies, how you build these out will really determine the type of attack that you're susceptible for. And if you can mitigate those risks as much as possible, well, then you're going to, if something does go wrong, yes, it'll go wrong, but it's only going to be a small percentage as opposed to the whole organization brought down. I think that's probably the best advice I can give on that front.
Anything to add on there, Simon, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think really from our side, it's always just the message is just preparation. Just put as much as you can into your preparation. The incident response plans, the tabletop, crisis simulations. That's going to put you in a much better position. As Damien says, sounds cliche, but it's kind of if not when, and that preparation piece is really going to put you in a better position. From our side as well, I think some other key things to note is EDR, have EDR in the environment, have it monitored 24/7. The amount of times that we go into an incident and the client might say, hey, we had the EDR in the environment, how did this happen? But it's been deployed, but it hasn't been configured and there's no alerting set up for anyone. So maybe, you know, the tooling saw something at 2 a.m. but didn't let anyone know, or it's going to a mailbox or somewhere that no one's monitoring. And then, you know, unfortunately by the morning they've got in and you know, done what they've done. So again, you know, EDR, and again from our side as well, make sure that there's logging switched on everything, and that there are adequate retention settings on that login as well. Again, we'll go in and we'll jump on a firewall, we'll jump on, you know, maybe it's a cloud, compromise, and there's just no login set up. And the concern, you know, obviously threat actors come in and they, you know, some don't really care. They're smash and grab. They're in and out. You know, they leave all their, you know, their footprint. For some of them will clean up and so on. But the difference between having the login there, the forensic data for us when we come in as well, is the difference between a business having to notify everyone on those servers as opposed to a small subset of users that we can forensically verify these guys these were affected by the incident, maybe these weren't. Because I think in the eyes of legal, again, I'll be careful here when I speak to this, but it's kind of, if we can't prove it didn't happen, we kind of have to assume maybe it did. And then so from the, you know, from OAC side of things, it may be that you end up notifying absolutely everyone on a specific, server, because we couldn't forensically say that their data wasn't affected. So again, you know, and also from a logging perspective, it gives us the ability to perform a thorough forensic analysis, which at the end, not only does the client know exactly what's happened during that incident, but it gives them some information around how to improve moving forward as well. So there's, you know, it's multiple, value aspects of that. But certainly from that legal perspective, it really does give us the ability to be quite accurate in our reporting. And, you know, I'm sure clients would much prefer that if they have to notify 100 people as opposed to 10,000, you know, that's going to be, you know, it's already a very difficult situation. Whatever we can do to lessen that impact, the better.
Simon touches a good point there about logging. You know, Microsoft will ship you Office 365 in what they call a dehydrated state. So none of the logging is turned on by default. And that's because Microsoft pay for that. They've got to store those logs. And, you know, simple things like enabling unified logging on the tenant, things like that aren't done by default that really should be. And so it's really important that you as an MSP, you know, identify what needs to be done on these tenants and secure them accordingly, and have things like logging in place, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to give you the information of how the breach has occurred. I think it's something like it takes 90 days on average for a business in Australia to identify they've been breached. And, you know, the good hackers will get in there and they'll be monitoring a mailbox for months and understand when a supplier sends an invoice, and then at the opportune time they'll send an email, like, you know, impersonating that supplier to say, hey, we've changed our banking app details. When you get the invoice on the 15th, make sure you play it to the new account. And, you know, the business is none the wiser until 2 months later the supplier rings up and go, hey, you haven't paid your invoice, what's going on? And they go, oh, we've paid it to your new bank account. And not only does it, you know, everything come out then, oh god, we've been compromised. So yeah, logging is really important, and I can't stress that enough. I mean, I was involved in something last night, and, you know, going through the logs was something that we do on a regular basis. And we were able to identify, hey, yeah, someone did get access to this account through a session hijacking or a token stealing, but they haven't actually acted on it yet. You know, they were able to steal the session. They probably have that token for sale on the dark web. We've revoked all those session tokens, you know, changed passwords, reissued or set up MFA, so on and so forth. But, you know, you wouldn't be able to identify that without logging enabled. So it's really important that you have that logging enabled and in place.
Mm-hmm. And you both mentioned there around reporting and notifying about the breach. Can you talk to, on that same page, talk to perhaps some of the legislation that's potentially coming out in relation to notification, being able to pay ransomware or not, direct liability? Can you guys kind of talk to that a little bit?
I can do a little bit. Obviously not legal, but there is there is some cyber legislation in the Parliament at the moment which could find directors and stakeholders of a business personally liable for up to $50 million. if you've neglected recommendations, say by your IT, and you've been breached multiple times, they'll make an example of you. So look, there are a lot of more changes going, and obviously after the Optus breach and stuff, the government looked at hardening those laws, and there is the new Cyber Act they're looking to pass will probably be February next year. Will certainly increase some of those requirements. I suppose also mandatory reporting if you do pay a ransom. I was watching or listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago where some of these ransomware actors are known terrorist organizations out of the state, American legislation, and that a business can't pay that because then they'd be in breach of significant laws, and so third parties are being involved, and you pay the third party. I mean, we certainly would not recommend paying a threat actor at any point. That's just a no-no. All you're doing is encouraging it further. Simon, I'm sure you'd have something you could add to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, when it comes to paying the threat actor, I mean, look, certainly no one is going to recommend that you pay the threat actor. We're certainly going to look for every option you have for recovery outside of being pushed down that path. I mean, the reality is, though, unfortunately for some businesses, that they find themselves in a position where it's either consider opening communications with the threat actor and potential payment, or close the doors of the business. And this is, that's when I think, if you're in that situation, if you find yourself in that situation, I think that's that's at that stage where, again, we're not going to tell you to pay a ransom. We're going to give you all the information we can, again, for the business to be able to make a business decision around what direction they need to go in. But I think, if the business find themselves between of closing the doors, and then I think at that point there may be considerations around why that might be a kind of a consideration, internally. But again, it's a difficult situation, because why would no one's going to want you to pay an international cyber criminal. Again, I guess it goes back to the preparation. It goes back to those backups. It goes back to all of those, key considerations that we've spoken to throughout this session, for which will put the business in a much stronger position if you do find yourself with unauthorized access to the environment.
Worrying stuff. And again, throughout this whole webinar today is preparation. So if there's nothing that anyone else or nothing else that people can take away from this webinar today, it's you need to prepare, and you need to prepare with each of your customers, because that's super important. So guys, we are running up on time. Firstly, I want to thank you, Damien and Simon, for joining us and dropping a heap of knowledge bombs for myself in particular, but of course for the audience. Are there any questions from the audience before we finish up? Now, we haven't had enough time for any horror stories. So what I might do is, Damien, Simon, if anyone wants to find you guys, ask you any questions, or talk about Solace or Solvit IT, where can they find you guys?
Damien, if you want to start.
I'm actually not on social media except for LinkedIn. So you can reach out on LinkedIn. It'd probably be the best place. Or submit a request, contact us request through the website. Not in LinkedIn for security reasons. I'm sure a lot of people will probably be in the same boat. When we used to do some penetration testing, that was one of the main avenues we'd use to identify some exploitable vectors for a business. So I made a decision very early on that I wasn't going to be on Facebook or Instagram or any of that stuff. But yeah, the business has pressured me into having a LinkedIn account, so I have a LinkedIn account.
All right, LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn. So, and same for me. You can definitely reach me on LinkedIn. Obviously, if you look up, CFC or Solace Security as well, on Google, you have a link to our website. You can call us here anytime. There's a number listed on the site there that you can come through, and we'd be more than happy to chat with you anytime. And I know the session's live at the moment and may go up on a site at some point, so it's only kind of relevant right now, but we're actually at CyberCon next week down in Melbourne for the week. I'll be there. We've got a booth, Solid Security in the main hall, and I would love for you guys to come by and have a chat. If there's anything you want to continue from today's chat, we can speak about horror stories. We can speak about all things preventative. I'd be more than happy. It'd be amazing to connect with people that were maybe viewing today.
Awesome. I'll certainly be there as well, Simon. So
Brilliant.
I'll come to the booth. You guys, just before we finish off, there is a handout for everyone. It's an incident response tabletop exercise in a box that we have. So if you do want to begin to start running those with your customers, that's a good starting point. And obviously you've got some experts in Damien and Simon that can always provide some advice if you need. So guys, really appreciate your time. Audience, thanks for joining us on a webinar today, and we'll have a good afternoon and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
See you, Reece. See you, Dan.